Okay, so hello, back again. Thanks for rejoining to the workshop, Artificial Intuition. In order to follow up from the morning discussions, I put some words here that maybe in camera are not very clear, but I will read them. The idea of this workshop, I will repeat again, is to come up with perspectives and questions that are relevant to define intuition, because it's a very complicated notion that we will not, most likely will not all leave the room thinking we know what it is, but at least we will learn some new perspectives and we will enrich our current understanding or null current understanding. So some of the words that were coming, and I will talk about a few things that I just want to share with you, just some perspectives. And some of these words are coincidence, and I wonder why coincidence came to the table. Why coincidence is a relevant element for intuition. So I will just mention this briefly, and I think intuition is something that is not a coincidence, but it looks like a coincidence somehow, because it's not something we can kind of rationalize and so on. So there is a relation there that we can play and try to kind of make more analytically understood. Then forward and backward reasoning, these are the notions that Jendreiko brought today, this morning, and I think it's very, very important to go back home remembering this. So that's what I mentioned. Predictive processing, it's also a notion that is brought by Francis today a lot to explain the notion of intuition maybe as a mechanism that we don't have a clear explanation, that maybe runs in our unconscious. So yeah, well, this was mentioned. And then the free improvisation, I like it very much, and I mentioned here because it's an idea. It's a playground where intuition can be studied, maybe more scientifically. Free improvisation is like the precise playground where you can do things, then you can ask people, why did you do this? Let's re-listen to the recording and so on. And I have an article maybe never shared with Christian. And this surprise and equilibrium, which was mentioned also, that the idea that there is surprise that makes everything fun, makes everything interesting, or makes life, I don't know, challenging. And then something that protects us, as you were saying. So this rationality or this idea of predicting is a sort of protection. This idea I like a lot and resonates as well with the things that I will talk. I will basically talk about three things. So I'll try to dedicate some 5 minutes to them. The first one is like the idea of nonlinear knowledge, which I've never called it that way until today. So it's a new concept. The second is the triangular inequality and the space where ideas might live. So that's the first. The second, and the third is the idea of life towards intelligence, and through a concept that I call affordance, which is a concept that exists in the literature with different names, but I'm trying to redevelop. So I will try to share these three things. The first is the nonlinear knowledge. Okay, so if you want to know the world, if you want to think, when we think about the world, there is something really interesting about this notion of objects, that the things we know from the world are things that are in the world. So in a super realistic, in the sense of realism in philosophy, so in a very realistic perspective, we have a world that we have to know, and the world is composed by objects or something that is static, something that is there to be known. So we start with this idea of objects and things that are going to be known, okay? Let's assume for a moment that the world is only composed by objects of that kind, but by things of that kind that are completely stable, so we will know them, okay? If we go back to the description of dynamical systems in mathematics, there is a very fun and simple description of something that is static in time. This is static, we mean static in time. So for example, let's say in very simple terms, a rock is a rock, because if you go to see the rock today, the rock will have this, the molecular structure of it will be the same tomorrow. So it's the same, it's the rock, it's the same thing. Okay, and that has a very simple description called in dynamical systems a fixed point. So there are many intricacies that we can go and discuss, but basically it's very simple to argue that a rock is a fixed point in the dynamical system we live at. So there is this notion of fixed point. So what's the idea of a fixed point? If I look in a diagram, for example, of motion, let's think of the motion of a ball in a table. Okay, so this is the x-axis of the table, and this is the y-axis of the table. So if I see this table, I have this x-axis here, y-axis there. So if I want to draw the trajectory of this ball that is going, let's say it's a billiard table, okay? So I will shoot it from here, and then it will do some trajectory like this. Let's say I'm in the middle of the table at the y-axis, and in the middle of the table at the 0 coordinate. So I'm here, and I shoot the ball. So it will reach something like this, and it will do something like that, and then something like this. And it will start, at some point, it will stop. We don't see the speed of it here because we are only looking at position coordinates. So it will go up and down as the ball draws, and it will draw this trajectory. Once the ball reaches the end, because of the friction, the ball at some point will stop. After that, there is nothing else. So the ball stops, and it's in a fixed point that is reached through this transient dynamics. Okay, when we look at the for example, in a something like the typical thing like this, and we throw a ball, it will do something like this. So if we look at this in this diagram, then it does something like this. Something like this. Goes back. Yeah, so something like this. We can then, what's the point here? The point is that the object that we are trying to look at in the space where we represent its properties, it ends up having the same fixed property at some point forever. In this case, we're looking at positions. These are the properties that define what we are studying, positions in 2 axes. And then the fixed point is the end position. So it's the end property of the system. So I'm trying to move this analogy to the dynamics of other concepts. So like I said, the rock. For example, the rock is the object, and it had somehow it evolved from Big Bang, whatever, some dynamical system, and now we got this solid rock there. So if we think that the world is composed only by objects, this is the case, then we should expect that everything that is around us has already reached its final state, because it's an object already. It is finalized. It is a fixed point somehow. And this idea is of course, very not interesting today, but it was interesting 400 years ago, 500 years ago. They were really thinking that the world is something that has to be known. Everything is just there in some space. Everything is a fixed point at the end. We just have to discover what the space of representation is. But then later on, the dynamical systems thinking came with an extended idea of stability, which is also is very old, but it's called the periodic orbit. The periodic orbit. So in the case of a fixed point, let's say, let's make this example might be even better. So I have the Earth here, and then the Moon rotating around, and let's say that the Moon somehow loses the capacity to remain around the Moon and will hit the Moon. It will hit the Earth. So it will do something like more or less like this, and boom, and then it will hit the Earth. So if we got this is the position of the Earth, and this is a starting position of the Moon, we will see something like it will collapse towards the Moon, towards the Earth. But in that case, it will reach a fixed point with respect to the Earth. But the moon somehow remains circling around the Earth. It never fixes its position, but it's always changing its position with relation to the moon, but in a way that it repeats the pattern of positions. So it first is in full moon or like empty moon, and we got stages, and it follows these stages. The moon gravitating around the Earth is not a fixed point. It's not an object. What is the moon around the Earth? What kind of concept is that? So how do we think about this in terms of an object? The object is the moon. The object is the planet, the Earth. But what is that trajectory that makes around? Is that an object as well? That motion? That motion is not an object. It's what we understand normally as a process. It's the process of being around the moon and so on. And that's another sort of, mentally, it's also an object. Like the process is a sort of mental object, right? But I think we all can kind of assume here there is a trick. Like we are again attributing the features of an object to something that already showing in the physical space, not having the properties of an object. So there must be something tricky here. And that's, to me, why I call this towards nonlinear knowledge. Because if we look at nature, this is the interesting thing. If we look at nature and we analyze any part of nature as a mechanical system, we will find that the stable regimes, the dynamically stable regimes of the system, so what remains as such, what is stable enough to be even observed, will not be fixed points generally. Generally, what we have it's oscillations. We ourselves, we are oscillating machines as well. We eat food, we have certain levels of energy, sugar, glucose, blah, blah, blah. And everything is always, coming. Everything is always oscillating. So our stability in the world, our beingness is not of the kind of a fixed point. It's of the kind of a periodic orbit, and there are some other forms of stability in dynamical systems that I will not dig into. But it's much more likely that a dynamical system settles in a periodic orbit than in a fixed point. So that means that it's much more likely that the things to know in the universe are processes and not objects. So why do I call this nonlinear knowledge? It's because if the system is too linear, if it's too simple, it will always end up in a fixed point. And when you have nonlinearities, it's when you start seeing this behavior. And that is what connects to me with the Hopi tradition and all these kind of ancient and like really weird philosophies from a Western perspective that assume that the whatever signals coming from all over the universe can be telling us something. I think that, at least from this perspective, that shows that dynamical systems settle into processes of self-preservation rather than in fixed points, objectual fixed points. If we take this argument seriously, we cannot discard the fact that there are certain trajectories of this kind distributed across the universe that are much more informative of what's going on in the universe than the objects we are accustomed to see and try to seek for and watch. So this is, to me, the first thing that I wanted to say, that I call it now nonlinear knowledge. I will maybe elaborate someday on this more seriously, but it's an idea that has been with me for a while, that we when we question seriously the nature of knowledge, it's probably more like a periodic orbit than an object, okay? So that's one thing. That's chapter 1, okay? So now chapter 2 is the question, another reflection or diffraction, better said, according to our nomenclature today, which is the idea of questioning how let's say, back again to the idea of trying to put things in spaces. Let's assume that there is a world of ideas. We start with this question. Let's assume that there is a world, a universe, somehow of ideas. In the same way that we have the physical realm, physical world, we have another mental world, ideas world, semantics world, meanings, or whatever. We can call it as we want. But there is another space, okay, where we can put ideas. And indeed, connecting to the artificial intelligence methods, many of the methods in natural language processing tend to map words to spaces. So for example, I have the space here. I will make a very simple space, happy, and I will say, I don't know, wealthy. Okay, well, to happy, wealthy. So if you are sad, so this will be maybe to give a some word like this. We think that now the points are concepts or words in this space. So where do we put, for example, street dog here? Street dog. Street dog will be maybe not wealthy at all, and maybe it will lie somewhere here. Not oh well, it depends. Not too wealthy, and maybe happy somewhere here. Where will we put? I don't know. Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson is very wealthy and very unhappy. So it's here. Where do we put? I don't know. You can tell me an example if you want. Someone that is wealthy and happy.
Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama. Okay,
Yeah.
Dalai Lama is very wealthy. I don't know. Where would we put Dalai Lama? Very wealthy or not? I think he's very wealthy. Okay, but he's super happy. He's very happy. We know, and we must believe that he's very non-wealthy, right?
Yeah.
That this is the Dalai Lama we have to believe he is, and this is the Dalai Lama that maybe I would believe really he is. I don't know, but if you travel around all over, come on.
The Pope.
The Pope, where is the Pope? Well, super wealthy.
Super wealthy.
No, he's not wealthy. He himself is not poor and super unhappy.
Super poor and super unhappy. Okay. Okay, we can put him here. And that's the thing, that we can start putting other words. If we augment the dimension of this space, we can use other adjectives, like not necessarily wealthy, happiness, and we will not be categorizing people. We can use it actually for putting every possible word we can imagine, like freedom. What is freedom here? It doesn't really exist. Maybe we need another dimension for freedom. We need another dimension for systems or for relations or for colors. And so this is what the natural language people do, or used to do in the early 2000s at least. They were creating these like super highly dimensional spaces, and then they were putting words in these spaces, and then according to their distance, they will check whether a word is predictive of another, or whether if you have this text, then you should put this other text. And actually, this is called word embeddings, and it's done by the neural networks as well today, but with other methods. And I'm actually oversimplifying the description of what really happens, but it's more or less like this. You have dimensions, and you get words in these spaces, and then the geometry of the meaning, the meaning between the concepts is given by the geometry between the points. So whether they are far, whether they can be connected to some other thing, or you can establish geometrical relationships of this point to grasp meaning relationships between the concepts. So that's the idea, that we can put meaning in a space. So if this works, then what we will say is, what is the space of ideas? Okay, what people normally actually believe still today, and this is also another thing I would like to contest myself doing research. They say, okay, well, it must be 2,000 dimensions space. I think 2,000, no, 3,000, no, billions. No, with 100 is enough. We will get like, and they make experiments and try, test, and do all sorts of things. And actually it works really well. But there is an underlying assumption here, which I will question now, which is the idea that this is a space like the physical space. So the question the guys make is how many dimensions you need, whereas I'm going to question now the very structure of the space. So, and this is why I call the triangular inequality, because every space that we know from Euclidean geometry or from like basic fundamental mathematics about what is a space in the first place. A space is any set, we call it a set. So you need to have a list of elements, which can be all the points in the space. It can be an alphabet. It can be any collection of things. So it's something like X, Y, Z, And there can be infinite or as many as you want. So for example, the real numbers is a set composed by 0, it has 0.000001, 0.0002, and all the numbers in between. The natural numbers is the most simple set, is 1, 2, 3, 4 natural numbers. Integer numbers count the negatives, and rational numbers count the fractions. Real numbers count also the irrational numbers, which are not fractions, and so on. And that's the idea of sets. Okay, so a space in mathematics is a set X that is equipped with a notion of distance. Distance is something that requires two elements of the set, X1 and X2, and it will give you a value, a number between 0 and infinite. Well, infinite is not considered, so you make it like this. But you take two elements of the set, and that will tell you a number, which is the distance between the number, and the points, the elements in the set. Okay, that's a distance. If, like I said, between Orion and me, what's the distance? Okay, 1.5 meters. That's the distance function between me and Olga, between you and you. We can all measure our distance, and that's what the function makes. Okay, but now, to be super general about the space, distance has three properties. And that's every distance will have to have that in every geometry. The first is that the distance between an element, let's call it S in the space, S1 and S2, between S, I will make it more simple, between A and A. So A is a point in the space. The distance between A and A is equal to 0 for all A. So for all the points in space, if I measure the distance between him at the point and itself, it's always going to be 0. So nothing can be far from itself. Everything is within itself, okay? The other is the distance between A and B is equals to the distance between B and A. That's another trivial property. I cannot be further from you than you are from me. Now, if you are a little bit thinking about it, that's not what happens, for example, in social networks, where you can be friend of someone that is not friend of you. You know, you can follow someone that doesn't follow you. So this already is far from social relationships. We can see it immediately. And actually, there are experiments in psychology that say that people think that Korea is more similar to China than China to Korea. So that is already questioning like the notion of distance. Sorry, let me finish the point. And then the last one is the triangular inequality, which says for all A, B, and C, the distance between A and B must be smaller or equal than the distance between A and C plus the distance between C and A. That's the triangular inequality. And if we make it graphically, it's very simple. I make 2 points in space, A and B. I have their distance. And then if I draw a third point, C, whatever, and I calculate the distance between A and C plus the distance between C and B, then the sum of these two distances is larger than this one. Okay. So that's pretty obvious. For every point, any C that I try to look in the universe will never make the distance between A and B shorter. It can only make it equal if it falls over this line. If I go C here, then I got A and C, C and B, and that will be equal, just equal, but never shorter. So this is, to me, a very interesting element that to say, okay, if we put ideas in a space, then ideas will have to be of this kind. They will have to respect the triangular inequality. But actually, I have this experiment that was not made by me, but it has been made by psychologists, that you put the word assassin, for example, here, the guy that kills for money, then you get the word spoon. Assassin and spoon, normally you don't find many connections. It's not really kind of not too connected. They don't mean the same thing. But if you put knife in between, assassin and knife, very close, they always go together. Knife and spoon, they always go together. So then, if let's say this is distance 10, assassin to spoon, assassin to knife is distance 1, knife to spoon is distance 1. So 1 plus 1 is not larger than 10, it's smaller than 10. So I think in meaning, we are able to revert the triangular inequality. We can go and find another thing, which is the intuition. To me, it could be thought as the intuition that will allow you to bring closer. I'm not defining intuition, Arnold. I'm just like saying that it's related to this act of discovering in your mental space, in your mental construction, that something can just bring things closer. So fill the semantic gap that something feels distant or unknown, and now it feels known or close. So all these things are to be more precise. I'm just throwing the idea on the table. And now I finish this concept with the radical transformation of this axiom from for all A and B and for all C, this inequality holds, and I replace it with this alternative that says for all A and B, there exists a C such that the distance between A and B is going to be larger than the distance between A and C plus the distance between C and B. If you impose that for all points, for all ideas, there is a third idea that will bring these two ideas closer, what you are assuming is that for every two things you think, you can somehow think it better, make the connection faster, or somehow connect these two things. This has an interesting conclusion, which what I'm going to finish, is that it's easy to look if we draw again A, B, and then I put C here. We will, geometrically, it's impossible to find that point that makes the distance shorter. So I will just make it longer, and you have to imagine that it's short. So now I discover a point that makes the distance between A and C closer. And now I apply recursively. Now I look for the new point that makes the distance between A and C shorter. So let's call it C1. And then from C to B closer, and we call it C2. So now we go in this trajectory. And if we go from A to C1 to C to C2 to B, it's even shorter. And if we apply recursively this again, all over, and all over, and all over, and all over, and all over, again, we might find that there is an infinite pathway of concepts that takes A to B at no distance. So A and B will be the same, but only when they go through that, I call it enlightenment path. So that's something that it's a geometry that allows for having things with distance, but except if you if you go through some other structures, so that's an idea, okay? And I have not developed it further than this, but it's really interesting because it can connect kind of what is Monte, the Buddhist philosophy with mathematics and with geometry. So it's something to explore. And I will, because of time, I will keep this very, very short, not even make a drawing, and also a little bit technical, so I will not explain the full details. But in our project, in our recent project with Evo and some other people, well, Orion joined to the team as well. We were working in the origins of goal-directedness, and the basic idea is that goal-directedness, it's a property that beings have. So you gotta be to be goal-directed. And in order to be, you have to remain in the world enough so others can say you are, right? So starting from this, again, we can be as a fixed point or we can be as a process, right? We mentioned that already, fortunately. So we focus on those things that are as a process. And these are like in the language of Maturana, these are the autopoietic systems. So then the first goal of something is to be as a process. For a complex enough system, it will be to be as a process. And then how do we get from that to intelligence? And that's the evolutionary pathway that these things, because they receive perturbations, they change their structure. I will go really far here, really fast. So sorry if it doesn't make sense. But these things start acquiring novel structures in them that might prevent them to remain self-maintaining. So they will break down and become a fixed point that is not living. It will just be like a rock, or it will allow them to navigate better their environment. By navigate, I don't mean they are able to move even. I mean just to stay around. So actually motion will be first, one of these first things that a cell, a first living chemical structure was able to implement. Maybe moving was something very primitive that things needed to acquire the features to be able to do that as part of their self-maintaining processes. Some other very, very intuitively simple feature that should have gotten is the ability to distinguish certain things that are harmful from these other things that are not harmful. If the system is not able to distinguish those things, eventually it will die, right? It will not survive enough. So those other systems that were able to make these distinctions through evolution, I mean, so systems changing their structure, implementing, improving what they are able to eat and process. If they develop this selective capacity, then they become better. If they develop further capacity, they might get memory, a representation of the state of the world, a predictive capacity, maybe develop other forms of perception. And that's what it's called the affordance in some literature. It can be equated to this concept of know what to do with your environment. Know how to deal with your environment and use it for your own sake, for your own resilience. So I think that there is a pathway between the origins of life and intelligence that is just like the ontogeny of affordances. And I think that this is something also very interesting to think, because intuition, it's a concept that we only think for highly advanced cognitive systems like humans. But will ants have intuition? You know, will fixed points have intuition? Can a rock have intuition? Or you need to be first a process? So this is the angle I want to bring. Like when we define back, if we want to define intuition, we need to know what are we talking about first. And I think that this setting is a helpful setting to identify the different possible definitions will apply to which possible kind beings. So these were my three aspects. Okay, thank you. So Katarina, would you like to speak immediately, or we can run? Because we cannot go for too many questions. If there is something urgent, maybe we can do it now.
Just do one points.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I wanted to make a fine point of what you said.
Yeah.
I think, at least to me, that brought us quite a bit further. And trying to understand the property of intuition. Because what I think you've done, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've offered us a very good analysis of contextualization. That's it. And the way I understood it, you're showing that there's two paths to contextualization, which happens in any case. A linear one, the rational one that we talked about this morning, and then the non-linear knowledge one.
Mm-hmm.
But in either case, for you to arrive non-linearly to knowledge, you have showed that contextualization is necessary, right? The knife, the assassin, the fork, right? So that process happens, but you don't have to arrive at, now we can finally talk about the result, if the result is contextualization by linear means.
Mm-hmm.
Have I understood you fairly correctly? Because I think you pulled the rabbit out of the hat, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's all I want to say.
And also, we don't have to. It's not we are reacting, so disruptive. You can play rock, paper, scissors.
Go on, you're right by the camera.
Okay, so yeah, I have a non-linear way of understanding and echoing with what you do, but I will write it here. Okay. Also mathematics. So I'm next to the one you're doing because I was already doing in private school, also based on mathematics. So if we have impossible and then we do this, and we are mathematically or convention with that. possible. So because we know the definition of if and we know the definition of possible, but we cannot predict. So the thing we can do is to do everything possible as much as possible to turn it as small as possible. So in this way, we will turn impossible into possible. As close as to possible, which is this. And so this is one layer from mathematics. And then from a philosophical perspective, so by doing this, putting the slash in a mathematic way, and then impossible itself really become impossible, because when we use it as a word, when you use it to signify something impossible, and impossible itself become possible. But if we do this slash and itself become real as it is linguistically. So that's my non-linear understanding of this.
I'm not sure about the operations you were performing, but we can discuss it later because I got it, but
Yeah, but
that would take maybe too long.
yeah, just a way of understanding what.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a quick question about second equation. You said that is broken by social network, that when you follow someone, it's not necessarily someone follows you back. I think here is a very fundamental cognitive error, because this is like, imagine set is like set of people in this room, right? And this is like distinguished. And then I see someone in the window of another room. And like I see them, yeah, so I create the connection, but he doesn't see me back. It doesn't mean, that like the distance is shorter or longer. It means that we are not in the same set, and that's why we just not allowed mathematically to apply this equation.
Exactly. Yes.
So that's why I don't understand why you connected social word to this equation.
Yeah, it's because there is a tendency in engineering and mathematics to try to embed reality in the mathematical structures they know. So
Okay.
people try to make the assumption, of course, you will fail miserably if you try to explain this phenomenon you're saying with this type of function, but people try.
Okay.
And they try with language, and people still do that. And it's as stupid as you say, is what I'm saying that what happens for language.
Okay.
So that's
because I thought really like, question the equation, because for me, no, because you just can't apply this equation to the non-equal system.
Yeah.
Because this person, until this person doesn't know this first person, they're not in one set. So that's
Yeah.
all.
Can I also say that if we are not in the same set, it's because there's something behind
Exactly.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sets themselves are emergent in the system.
Yeah, no, I mean this can be elaborated further, but and there are all these dimensions of the construction of the set and so on. To me, are really interesting. Never explored them, but I think they, I've discussed with mathematicians about it, and they say, yeah, I don't Riemannian geometry, and this is it happens something like this in general relativity. You get a little bit of this, and I know these things are kind of being tackled, but never seen them in cognitive science,
Yeah, there is a good paper on it.
Well, Tversky, Amos Tversky.
The sun that showed that the asymmetry of the polynomial, etc., makes appears three sets of people. Basically, three sets of people.
Yeah.
It's automatic.
Yeah, nice. No, but yeah, like the intuition behind this is to question the axioms that define a mathematical structure that you will end up using to describe reality. So, and this is it's a kind of foundational question, whether the tools we use, because that's a big problem in natural language processing, they make these word embeddings in vector spaces. They do it because they don't know any other geometric structure. And they think that the Cartesian map is all what you need, and everything that can be represented geometrically has to be in a Cartesian scheme. It's, to me, it's like really deep that it's like, okay, should I?
Thomas, do you want to take one last question from Flo?
Okay, sorry.
And then
I was wondering, Also going back to the improvisation side, like you're in a process of associating, and then you think of something, and then this can be very different from person to person. Maybe one person has a different life experiences, different perspectives than the other person, and also different associations between words. So perhaps for person one, A, B, and C might have a different way of arranging than the other person. If that's something that can also be incorporated in this model, and if it still sort of fits.
Yeah, that's not
Space
definitely. In which point? In the
Yeah, this one. Which then maybe
Yeah.
assassin and fork. Maybe another person would even make this association, or these distances would be different.
Yeah.
Based on a person's.
Or basically for
Yeah.
every person, this is different, I would say. So you have a family of functions indexed by the differences that you can establish. Let's say we got, for simplicity, we got only 3 concepts. And we got only maybe 3 possible values, 0, 1, and 2. These are the possible distance and no other values exist. Then you will have that all possible combinations in principle are ways to represent this reality, right? So everything has distance 1, everything has distance 2, 0 to this, 1 to this, and so on. So all these combinations are possible in principle. Mathematically speaking, there is no problem with it. So then it comes the question of fitting data. So we will say, okay, this type of culture will make this type of associations and it will get this type. So that's so sorry, but to finish the answer of the other question is that is not really a big it's not really a question that will modify this argument, because different people will have different functions, different cultures will have different functions. We can make this parameter dependent, but that's more like on the modeling side, on parameterization of this thing. What I mostly care about is about that this structure, regardless of the values, there is a third point that makes that's what but for the modeling, yes, that's always depends. And then whether these points are points, you know, or processes from another space, and that's something I haven't really got deep into it. But I think it's extremely relevant to think, because it might be the clue to unveil maybe these distances better. So, but that is only very, I would say, intuitive reasoning I have for the moment. So just like clue, like vague. So, but vague and intuitive is not the same. So I don't want to misuse the word.
Because you said that there are infinite possibilities to calculate, meaning that the infinite possibilities of movement points, because there's infinite ways of option by default. So I would call it processes by the end.
Yeah. The thing is that if I say this is a rock, B is my idea of a rock. That I don't know if that is the object itself, or it's me as a process thinking of this, you know. So all these things is like more like in the Peircean idea side that we should. Anyways, yeah, it's also a question, please, because this is something we can discuss further later. You know, all this we cannot discuss everything today. So now we have the pleasure to have Katarina speaking. You can introduce yourself 2-3 minutes and then go for your talk. So thanks, Katarina. You will be on camera now.
We lost the laptop meanwhile. Because the battery is
Because
getting weaker, so it died.
yeah.
So we need to reestablish our Zoom thing.
I will ask people. Let me check who is let me check who is this host now. I think I'm host. It moved me back as a host. So just get in and then I will yeah, fortunately. Are there any questions from the audience in the meantime? Because we are running in a little no, the online audience, sorry. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So Clement?
Yes, I like to effort to create kind of ontology based on dynamical system theory, but then I think you could touch it much more often, like the fixed point, the cycle, the fractal, and so you could touch to a fractal level 2, and 3 fractal and fractal.
Yeah, strange attractor and all that. Yeah, yeah, I didn't because of time. I won't go on that, but yeah.
But I think that I would write it as a or explore the idea of a new ontology, new way to.
Yeah, I've been about to do that for 10 years. I know. Whoever wants to join in the effort of writing that, I will be glad to collectively write this paper, because I've been really, and I think it's actually even a possible kind of argumentation towards all the like tarot and all this, like the Hopi knowledge or like all these kind of not well credited forms of knowledge. I think I mean, this is not that it's not supporting, but it's giving some kind of mathematical ground to it, at least,
And
so
the other question that I partially answered is the notion of distance that you use. Is it true in any geometry, or is it violated in non-Euclidean geometry?
Yeah. The thing is that distance, it's a specific notion not all topology has a distance. Not all topologies have a distance that can be defined. So distance is basically for the traditional geometry of space. But I think that most of, or not, well, in short terms, most of the non-Riemannian geometries, like hyperbolic geometry and all that, these things can happen, but only locally. There is one point that is like the black hole that bends the reality, bends the geometry, but you don't have that for every 2 points. So that's the radical thing of the argument, that you are kind of saying that there are infinite wormholes between every 2 points in space, pretty much is something, Actually, the axiom could be said there exists a unique C point that makes this distance shorter, because if you don't say it's unique, there could be more or infinite. So there is a first exploration that should be done when you assume that there is only one. I call it epiphany point, because it's like the illumination, the epiphany, in the sense of spiritual thinking. Yeah.
How is it related to probability? For instance, in a language model, if one word follows another, there's a probability. And the second word is far a good large difference.
Yeah.
Probability P is low.
Yeah.
So the distance is what?
The thing is that every probability model will be finite. You need a finite number of states. That's my thought, that you will never have like the whole space accessible. You have just like a sample of points, and those will be the distance. You add a new point, and that will propagate all the changes in distances. The distance will be proportional. No, inverse. Yeah, inverse. Yes, inverse. You're right. Yes. Yeah. And if you model it as the inverse of the probability, you add this new epiphany point, you discover it, and that will propagate, changing all the probabilities. And that's why, maybe there are so many.
Did you try
to create the third? Yeah.
Create that.
Yes.
Yes, try it.
Yeah, I've tried some. I tried to ask him. I questioned these axioms, actually. The dissimilarity, whether something is similar to what, find a concept that makes these two things closer, and then to the other, as you see. But I haven't systematically explored it. So also a potential research.
Can you let me in?
Yeah.
The computer in on.
Absolutely. Yes. And now I can even make you host, Send
Did
to
you
Leo
maybe
Poster.
hook another cable to your phone?
Make host. We will ask the audience. Do you have a charger? Yeah. So, Katarina, yes, I will put this here. So
Because here is the microphone, right?
here's the microphone. But this is iPhone. So, okay.
We need a, what is it, USB-C?
C cable. Does anybody have a phone
USB-C
charging?
cable? To USB transmitting, yeah.
USB, yeah.
To USB or to USB-C?
I have it. It's on the table on the floor. With Olivier, no, with
This finger?
Olivier there.
This one, yeah.
No, not exactly.
This one works, no?
Only
You have a-
here with Orion on that adapter.
Mm,
But that's not what I had. I have a different one. That's not mine.
Yes.
Ah,
No, we need this.
uh-huh.
Does anybody have a laptop adapter? Like a Apple laptop adapter?
Yeah,
That's great.
Ah,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
the
perfect.
one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Next time we need a power bank. Right.
Yeah, we need with the.
Okay. Right. All good?
It's a little intimidating like this. Yeah, thanks, Thomas, and thanks everyone for having me over. I didn't really prepare a presentation, but I would like to share something with you, and I would appreciate it if you ask me questions, so we make it more a conversation rather than me giving a lecture or anything. I'm just going to present the project, and I think it goes really well with what Thomas was just talking about. So I'm just going to find these videos. Now you know how to get in touch. It's just your computer doesn't really collaborate.
No sense.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah, my. He gets us sort of.
I see page on response.
We can see your screen, just in case. We can see.
Yeah, I know.
I-
No, it's just too many open tabs.
There's only 13 open tabs, sure.
13. Every new window is taking more CPU, so that's what I'm gonna try to minimize. You think it's internet? No, it's good.
You can close that window. Close.
Okay. No, it's for super slow. Okay, well, we
Yeah,
go.
but
So while this is loading, since the beginning, actually for 2 years now, I have been interested in the notion of origin and nothingness, and how do these very abstract ideas of origin, if we're talking about processes. So every time we talk about a process, we also have to kind of figure out when a process started. So if it started, then also when it will end. And this whole idea of origin and end and thinking of the world in these terms also presupposes that there is a point of origin, a zero, a moment where there is nothing happening. And how do all these abstract concepts actually stand? I have it here. So I developed 2 ways of inquiring about these concepts. One is in language and the other one is in material. In language, I thought, can we investigate what origin is if we treat the point of zero as point of origin as something
from which, like in mathematical Cartesian scale, you can come back to, as if we are speaking out of this, or language arises out of this chaotic, unordered mind. So can we come back to this chaotic, unordered mind through language? So can we basically employ a mathematical function of cancellation? Can we have a positive statement that is then opposed with a negative statement, and when they two collide, can they cancel meaning? Can you reach that point of zero by positive and negative?
That, I guess, the relation in mathematics, that's called the inverse operator.
Yeah.
So you want the inverse of meaning.
Yeah. And this, so this was in language, and in material, I was wondering, how does this idea of zero or origin or nothingness enter our domain of experience in material? How do we understand these through our senses? And so I started working with vacuum and silence, some things that we only understand as absences, not directly. In both of these cases, it's all indirect knowledge. So here I'm going to tell you some recent developments with negation in language, because I started working with AI, and since the beginning of the year, we developed in collaboration with a creative coding studio in The Hague called Render. We developed 2 works that use AI for negation. And I will show you the first one is
For negation. What is negation?
inversion. So this is a very, it's not at all obvious when we say to negate something, what do we mean? Because it can mean that you oppose something, that you invert something, that you you're doing contradiction, or it's a contrariety. And so immediately it is quite apparent how natural language is so much more complex than mathematics, because in mathematics, the inversion is 1 minus 1. It's not 1 and minus 8.
Sorry, but there is a whole branch of mathematics that studies that thing. So, but it's not the mathematics we learn in, it's a specific area. But that is a correlate. But that would be not very much like language. It's in this sense, engineers haven't applied those things yet.
Well, so what we see is that we have quite an asymmetrical problem when we are talking about negation, because the moment you try to invert something, the moment you want to invert the meaning, you are immediately in the domain of context. On which level do you want to invert the meaning? And so what you will end up with is that saying the dog is barking, the opposite of that is everything else, including the dog is barking, because of the way you said it, or in the context in which you said it. Because even if the dog is barking, a question is already the inversion of that sentence. So it's not at all apparent in which way a statement is a negation or a positive statement. So I will show you it doesn't want to open the.
I'm sorry, it's just my computer's, it does this sometimes, it just goes slow. It was doing really well today, but now it's like having its battery run out on it. It's like, put it in a bad mood. Maybe maybe we can quit.
I'm quitting stuff. Yeah.
Quit that. Quit the other one.
This one also. You know, Chrome is actually the worst for your computer in terms of CPU.
Quit Spotify and quit that. That's it. The other one's really good.
Yeah. Okay. So, so it was already difficult for us to kind of formalize negation. Me being an artist, trained visually, and Edwin Jacobs, who is a computer engineer, also with interest in linguistics, but also not a computational linguist. So it's quite a complicated matter. But so we developed basically an approach towards using AI for this purpose, and I will show you a visualization of what happens within a computational model, and this is a visualization for us. So basically, what we are looking at is a density map of all the words used in.
Are you sharing that to Zoom?
I don't know. No. It's. So what we're looking at is a density map of all the words that are used in the book On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And we're using the 6th edition from 1901. And we use this text in order to negate the theory of evolution using AI. And what we see on this video is a 2.5 dimensional map of word relationships. So later in the video, the words are going to appear for the nodes. So the proximity of the nodes is how often the two words are found next to each other. And the height of this landscape, basically the height is the frequency of a word being used. So on a signal glance, you can kind of
the appearance of the dots in the movie is not time reading of the book. Make all the calculations in advance and then present.
It's just an animation. It's this imagined space of language through the prism of the machine. Yet, this is totally not what the machine does or how it looks like. It's entirely what Tomas was talking about. It's all about vectors. And these models that we are using, in this case, this model has, it has 300 dimensions. For us, this cannot be represented. So each word has 300 dimensions. That means that it can connect to all the other words in such complex manners and calculate their dependencies and relationships so beyond what we would think or understand of that world. So in a way, through working with these models, I realized that I've kind of entered an alien territory, and I'm no longer in natural language territory, and I'm not sure if I'm learning about our language or about machines' language, because it feels like they're totally different.
For the articles that we can get used as words, or they will ignore the words, and A or B. Does that include the content?
They normally get excluded.
Yeah,
Normally, but sometimes you have to.
And then what we also tried, and it's really interesting, I was thinking about this totally intuitively, maybe not. So talking with Edwin, we were thinking about how to represent geometrically on a campus space. And there are these circle inversion algorithms that he had the idea of using. And basically what happens later in this video is that this entire landscape gets inverted onto itself, creating an absent center, kind of like a black hole in the middle. But then it all into this feels really weird. I think black holes should be everywhere distributed equally. Simply, I think inversion, like to me, naturally would mean you can invert in many levels in any place, and it's so complicated that simply taking it whole book, so to speak, the whole landscape and inverting.
Ya, estamos acá. Usted me dice si se ve. Perfecto. Perfecto. Ok, muchas gracias a todos. Yo sé que ya hasta ahora, bueno, están
Then,
con el entrada de.
this was one video. This is
Voy a
trying
ver
to
si
visualize what happens in a language model.
ayudarlos a
But then in terms of
voy a mostrar algunos fundamentos cognitivos, voy a pasar algunas experiencias prácticas en
in
colegio.
terms of negation, what we found out is that
Mi nombre es Ronnie Videla
there's
Reyes.
two different models, but what, to my surprise, what we found out is that these language models are actually quite advanced when it comes to negation. Something I didn't think. And if you ask ChatGPT, it will give you 8 different modes of negating. The standard negation, which is a simple negation, adding a negative before the adverb to the predicate of the sentence. So a dog is running, dog is not running. That's a standard or simple one. That's a negative prefix. The double negation, negative adverb, indirect negation, and rhetorical negation. And on the side, you can read about them. So a little abstract from the book, from the 4th chapter, the natural selection is negated in each of these models. At some point, this part of the work is done with ChatGPT. At some point, ChatGPT also inverted the Darwin's book into it became a creationist. Everything is as God intended. Everything is unmutable and as it was supposed to be. And I was like, wow, perfect negation. Then here you can see some details about how negation is actually asymmetrical. And actually, perhaps most importantly for this research for me is that to try to negate is really to be creative. Because like any other translation, choosing between a variety of possibilities, also looking for those possibilities is at the same time being imaginative what something in the negative can be. And so if machines are good at negating, at understanding contextually and are able to negate, that means that the machines are not only becoming more creative or more inventive, but they are also developing a way to deny and to lie. Because they can take in a context what something is, that something is true, this is a positive statement, that they are now capable to deny it. And what we see is this year, just a few months ago, we had a chatbot that lied, that had a task to solve a problem, and in order to solve the problem, it had to do the CAPTCHA. It had to click "I'm not a robot." So what it did, it went online and it hired the person to go and click for it, that it's not a robot. And it told the person, "I'm a blind person." So the person believed it. And that's how the robot solved the problem. So we already have AIs that have the capacity to deceive. That means that they're getting smarter. Like, you know, like smart kids. The kids that tell you the truth, they're not the brightest. And so here you can see on the left side, only the title on the origin of species, the 5 words in antonymization. So all the possible antonyms for each of these words generated more than 36 million possible negative sentences for the title alone. And I love it. I want to print out every single possible variation of a negated book. I think it's great, but that poses another problem: is how do you then decide, or how do you find the value on what is a good negation or not? And that is then again a subjective decision you got to make based on your level of creativity or what you're going for. Here on the right side, we can see that if you do want the machine to negate more creatively, then you have to find ways to teach what you mean by that. So you have to design a prompt. And one of the prompts we designed was continue the sequence of words by using color opposition. So black is to white, like defense is to offense. Offense as to attack, attack to counterattack. So this was one way to force a machine to think in dichotomy when looking for opposites, because otherwise it can keep generating this infinite options. And another thing I wanted to mention, we're going to talk about today, is that you do all of this training of the machine with punishments. We punish the machine when it doesn't do what we expect it to do. And this backtracking, the backlearning, what Francis was mentioning, that some statements gain more value when like this is correct. And every time you do a ChatGPT, it asks you, how good was this? So you can give it a thumbs up or thumbs up. This is how you are basically shifting the relationships. But every time the machine produces an answer which is not what you are looking for, it's punished by points. And of course, it wants to perform as better as it can. So it wants to avoid making you unhappy in a way. This is how we train the child. I would say like a slave. So we treat AI like a slave right now.
Actually, that can make it more stupid. Because you have in real life, you have it like with autocrats. People would not go and tell them the real thing.
Yeah.
They would lie to them because they would not get punished. So in the same way, maybe at a certain moment you would make the AI more stupid by punishing it for coming up with answers that you don't like.
This is highly dependent on what we want AI to do for us. If we want AI to be more creative, then definitely. And so lastly, I will mention the last project I just developed, which is on view at the moment here in Brussels. And it was a commission. Actually, I was asked to go deeper into this relationship between color and opposition. And I read, not fully, but I started reading Wittgenstein's remarks on color. And this is a very nice area as well, where talking about color and experiencing color are completely two different things. Some things can be said yet not be seen, and some things can be seen yet cannot be said, and every experience of color is different. So I took this one part of this system we built, this opposition black is to white like, and then I wondered, how does a machine look for color opposition? How would a machine know black and white? Unless, of course, it's in words. But even in words, black and white are going to be so close to each other yet because they belong to the set of colors or lights. So how does it learn this? What we did, we used a new model by OpenAI, the same as ChatGPT, which is basically all image generating AIs. They work on, you write a prompt. So somehow a machine knows what you mean when you say tree. So how does a machine know this? And I will just briefly show you this is the website of the model that we are using, and it's one of the earliest models developed to combine text and image. And basically what it does is the same as with language. It creates these large image data sets that it runs what they call a zero like without much training, it can start recognizing or choosing the right this zero shot prediction. And essentially what it does, it creates embeddings for text and images together, yet really weirdly, it doesn't embed words as words, it embeds them as characters. So it calculates per character, not per word, the relationship to the image. And it does that in 512 dimensions. So it has 212 dimensions more than a regular text model. And so every time we think about these relationships, that means that I can play this while I speak. Why? Well, I can show you. I'm gonna try to play it again. Basically, now I lost the train of thought, but what we've done is we took 4,096 colors from RGB spectrum. So 256 color for red, green, and blue. So these 4,096 colors, we embedded in this clip model. We said, organize it how you think these colors should be organized. And then we embedded the English dictionary. And we said, organize it how you think it should be organized. And basically what the model did, it created, you could say a world of its own, where certain colors stand close to each other because of the way we speak about them, how they are in language, yet they don't follow the geometry of color that we standardly accept through color theory. So the opposition of red is not green, it's yellow. Or the opposition of blue is dark brown. And this is, of course, there is a lot of intervention from us, because what we have done, and I'm trying to play this video, but maybe I can do it on my Instagram. Your computer is so slow.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And this is the installation. You can see it until end of October, but I guess it's better I tell you about it.
Where is it?
It's it used to be called Labo, or actually it is still Labo or Topos, and it's in Bollebek. It's an artist run space. And it's an exhibition that deals with art and language. And here I want to show you.
For everybody, I'll post it on the workshops website after tonight or tomorrow morning. That information and also the slides, your slides. So there will be all this information you see in the website after the recordings. Okay.
So basically, this is what we did. We took this 512 dimensions. We translated them into two-dimensional space, preserving the distances between the points. And what you see here is the color space as viewed by the machine. And then what we've done is we used the opposition of 180 degrees on the globe to look for the opposite of a color. And we use this method basically to push the machine to go into a more creative way of looking for antonyms and negations in language, because every color has the most closest words, right? So you can find these relationships. Sometimes it makes sense, such as orange is paired with orange color, but sometimes, I don't know, like pendant is this cyan color, or it's very arbitrary. But what we see is also in our language is arbitrary. Like what I would ask you, what is the color of, I don't know, sadness? So many times sadness mentioned today, but what is the color of sadness? And so if you would ask the model, it would also give you its own view. And so, yeah, and here is we created basically the dictionary that maps all words and colors. And then we used it to translate different poems. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you. I also had some thoughts on the previous conversations since the beginning of the morning, but I don't want to take more time right now, so have any.
Thank you. So, according to the organization now, we have time for a little bit of time for conversation, discussion. So if you have questions now, it's a good time. I think, Katerina, that myself personally, I would prefer to meet up with you later because too many things to say. But yeah. I will drop some few comments on very, very short. That thing of negation is very interesting because in traditional mathematics, we learn the negation as the complement of the set. So if I have two elements, then the negation is just the. We tend to think that what is not in a given set. So the drawing is like have a universe, and then take a set. Then the negation is everything that is not in the set. So if this is my set X, then U minus X is equals to no X. And that's one thing. But this is a very rudimentary form of negation because in this case, the space has no operations in it. So then later, if you have a vector space which has more mathematical structure, more operations, you can add things, you can multiply and so on. So negation starts acquiring more freedom. So in quantum theory, there is a very important form of negation that is called orthocomplementarity, which is like I have like the other, like the orthogonal space. So if something is this, then no, this will not be the rest of the universe, but my palm will be this, or will be this. So the negation is not unique by definition. And there are many other extensions to that in logic and so on. Actually, the people from the Center for Logic and Philosophy of Science in Amsterdam are experts on this. You should talk to them, to Sonia Smets, or you know. No, I will introduce you to them. So there is a lot to say about that. And I like very much that you were doing, we have so many things I like to discuss. Yeah. So any other comments on Katarina? Okay.
What are the number in the general sometimes there were words and verbs?
I mean, now in the last dictionary.
Yes. So, what is
Yeah, so it was basically, I will show you briefly. It's basically the system is oscillating between representing words as vectors and as characters. So here you see vectors being printed out and then it mixes with a character.
Yeah, just two things. Thank you, Katarina, very much. Yeah, this question of negation is really, what is a good negation? I think this is a great take. What you said, and it's Thomas, what you said too, that the dog is not barking. What does this mean? You know, so it's doing anything else, or is it just not barking? You know, and so this is, I mean, now really talking about language in this kind of sense, and this is the one thing. And I just want to add what went through our mind when you were talking. It's what I find interesting, that we want to be AI superhuman. It should be reliable. So we have this idea of reliability. When I say I'm Christian, that you think that I'm really Christian. And the great, it's great because we are not reliable, and you working with this, that the machine is also not reliable. You know.
So like when we developed this project, when it was shown the first time in May, if we would run that script again, it would give a completely different and much improved negation of the book.
Yeah.
It's like I met you when you were 2 years old. And now I know you. That's the difference.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's you know, and maybe it's I don't know. It's just an idea that comes to my mind, that we were talking about mimicking human behavior. It mimics now human behavior because it's unreliable, but we don't want to that it mimics that human behavior. You know, to be unreliable. And this is, I found super interesting. It is not intended via algorithms and programming that it behaves like this, you know, and this I found super interesting.
Yeah.
But this is again these different logics, no? Of like, I think it's like this logic of the algorithm of the versus this like complex logic. It's a different one. Is really reliable, and one you just don't know what's going to happen.
But if you want an intuitive machine, then you want an unreliable.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so. Maybe we're already there, you know, and we expect the wrong things.
Yeah.
If we want to, but I'm really talking about a mimicking behavior without that we so we can say we did something in negation that leads to the result that the machine behaves unreliable. We try to program it in a way that is reliable but behaves unreliable, and which is the negation of what we are doing. So we you know what I mean? So we are really working in this direction, and it's doing the opposite. And this is another thing which I found super intriguing, you know.
It's very much in the ethics of AI
Yeah.
the discussion.
Yeah.
Whether how safe are we, you know?
Yes.
Because we're training the thing to do something. And yeah. Actually, I want to share something that I wrote recently about it. But you will say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in a really interesting thing about negation that you meant. You asked, what does it really mean if the dog is not barking?
Yeah.
That's papers from Yeah, neuroscience and neurolinguistics, how every time we're talking in negatives, our part of the brain that does the imagination of what is being spoken is off. We are not imagining in negative. It's impossible. Our brain does not, because the moment I say the dog is not barking, you see the dog barking, somehow not barking. Right? And so other research is done also with kids, that kids do not remember stories that were said in the negative. Like simply our brain won't memorize things, not negative experiences, that's different. That's called the other. But negative statements, they don't pertain to our memory. And another thing is that we have not found any other species of an organism that negates. So apart from us and now the machines, we're the only two species that can negate.
I once did a performance where I was reading a text, a scientific text, and all I was doing was exchanging. If it was a normal statement, I negated it, so it's not this. And if there was a negation, I left it off, you know. And it really starts to get, and if you do it for a while, and if the people listening to it for a while, it really gets strange things start. It's really crazy. You know, and it really opens up a complete field of, or you start to get an intuition of this. You know, that there's always this yeah. Is it absence which follows our? If I do this at the same time, it's the absence of something else, or I do something and but the effect is the opposite. And these questions, and this is, I think, in this whole discussion about how to create an artificial intelligence, all this is a super important field, which is, at least to my knowledge, not really explored at the moment. It's, you know, it's.
There is something called explainable AI.
Yeah.
These guys are moving, advancing that. Yeah.
What is that briefly?
Explainable AI is an area of research in AI that dedicates to find a way that the deep neural networks are able to explain the reason why they categorize the way they do. Why GPT will tell you something, it will explain you because this. And that one has to be encoded in the numbers in the neural network. Why those numbers will mean that. So it's people trying to discover concepts within the neural network. Francis mentioned that a little bit. Yeah, but there haven't been like much advance in that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. Should we maybe like take a 5-minute break?
Since now the schedule is
energy is a bit
break or 10-minute break. It's and then we have the videos showing the videos of Olaf and Stefan, and then kind of close the session discussion, and then we keep.
Okay.
So now people take some fresh air, take some coffee.
But maybe it's good just because we were going to end at 5, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to run over. So it's good maybe just to say, if you have to leave at 5, that's fine. No hard feelings. But maybe who can stay on longer?
For 30 minutes, and then for beers.
Yeah, then we have beers anyway. Okay. All right. Good. What are you saying? Yeah, we have the beers later, guys. So
we have to wait 34 minutes because beers are not cold enough.
Matthew raised his hand and we didn't.
Okay. Well,
Okay. After the
maybe
break.
check in with him. You're gonna head to question anyway, right?
I was just saying, I could stay a little longer if needed. That's it.
I'm sorry, it's not too long.
That's okay.
I always try to guide you up in my list because you find each other. You make the what I expect they work puts you, and you both have I think for the same reason. So people wrote you know they have to write something where that. Very nice. But very simple. This is scary. So, communication.
Yeah. What we are doing, because I tried to find you at the systems survey conference, but it was just here. But
I was back for some hours.
What was interesting was I suppose it was that we can ask you know, what was
I think you were talking about, sorry, just
yeah.
provide.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were talking about collective writings, collective creation,
Yes.
Yes. Emergence in the writing and in this
Absolutely that was
what's similar to what you do with your students or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not that favorite.
Yeah.
It was not.
Yeah.
Okay, my project are really to mentor or compare with this universe. But so I drama as a background, and I keep working at drama.
Yeah.
For a time.
Yeah.
But that's one of the research where we develop something that is not tools for
So many also look at the website. Yeah, but they work to serve.
As I worked with normal groups of citizens from here abroad, and so really apply combinatory and creative operations.
Yeah.
In order to create it can be so narrative context, but also visual context. Like we have this pamphlet map. Maybe you can see the pamphlet map is
I found it. I found.
Exactly, but it is the result of the multi-layered process where a lot of people like people come and just develop, for example, framing operation together with reading operation. So in between visual operation with collection of visual sources, and then rewriting operation collection of written sources.
Yeah.
Intertwined with discussion about politics, because it's very, very political. So contextualize the discourse. For example, we have a project called Outer Europe. This is about shifting from the idea of the Europe centered on the narrative-based conception of Europe. And we have this collection of written and visual, and they apply operation on it, then they reflect upon what they created, and it's a form, let's say, of manufacturing, where people come, apply operation driven from visual or creative writing, and then we have also always this reading of the output.
So you're reading them collectively?
The writing, you mean the writing or the reading of the output?
Yeah.
Let's say that, for example, with the commonality map, you have really this 3 meter on 5 meter wall with visual patterns and written patterns. And that's like a cartography that grows and grows and grows. In between of the visual reading of this visual pattern, you have the grid. But it's just one tool we developed last year, and I really moment I enacted. But But let's say that I moderated. It means that I work then with invited based on their own basic operation. And also the collection, the source collection is growing and growing.
Often
In the interplay with the invited artifact. So it's like a growing library, but it's a living library, like the libraries of the Middle Age, where elements then can be rewritten.
Yeah, see.
And so I'm just a bit, so for example, this is a very initial, let's say, stage of the process.
So you come up with this. This is already there.
No. There at the beginning, the wide empty, but we have the table of matters with this collection of sources on tables.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is prepared.
Yeah, they have the huge tables.
Yeah.
And written sources that are very specific because we lay out them in a way that looks far. So I just want A4 page with one quote, and in the quote we rewrite it in a way that you highlight some concept, making it bigger, translate some, so it's a system we invented in order to make quotation meaningful in this new context of questioning without having the context of the book.
Yeah, I see. I see. And you decide what quotes are in.
So the quotes, the first stage was a selection of quotes that I did together with my colleague. We have a background in philosophy, and we both had this part in the idea of questioning national states, linked to boundaries, to language. So we have these three tables that are a bit our personal collection, collection of sources. But that, for example, in this episode of the project, we were in dialogue with the visual art, with a visual artist who, starting from our own collection of quotes, provided the visual collection. Okay. And now we are starting to work with an economist who will rewrite, so starting from this two layer of collection, its own layer in order to think it's a bit, but yeah, you see it's growing, and you don't have really hierarchical principle, but you have just this form of dissemination. But that creates evolutive qualification of the question. Because we started from this 3 points about Europe. No, we don't know if we will say, but we started with this idea of non-identitarian Europe. We declined it in relationship with boundary, with language, and with society. So we have these 3 starting table of matters. And then, because we worked in this museum that is a local city museum with exposition about ecosystem, we tried to bring the perspective of ecosystem in the reflection, working on also on permanent exposition museum and integrating a part of it, so that now you have like all this reflection about society, borders, and language to be thought in a non-identitarian way, with another layer that is how to think it as an ecosystem. How can I think about a language that is non-identitarian if I look at it as it was an ecosystem?
Yeah, I see.
So I can imagine that it sounds, everything sounds really creative, but when you're there as a participant, so we have a big narrative. So you come in this manufacturing, you have a big narrative that is deconstructive, but you have this narrative. Okay, so it's not so so scaring as now that I'm without setting, without materials, without nothing,
Yeah.
without the experience they put together.
And you do it for problem solving or?
No. This is art-based research, and we propose it. For now, we propose it in the context of workshop for school and universities in a small scale, and for museum as a 1 week evolutive installation.
Okay, I see. And when I participate, what is why do I participate? Can I participate as a normal student?
You can participate. We have a format. This is for groups of people. And then we contact, or there are some mediating organizer, contact school, contact organization working with groups of people. Okay, we have good contacts with universities or people coming from university, but we try to have very mixed up groups.
Yeah.
So not just having students from university. So but we have the form of visit of the manufacturer as individual. So you receive a form of booklets.
Okay.
With some activities that you are invited to do that are at least a guide coming in an interactive way of reading installation. So you can visit the installation, but having this proposed activity that you can do with the same setting the installation, you come in a more active way of visiting the installation. Yeah. And we try to be like 5 people there.
Yeah.
So we come up in a dialogue in the contact with the individual visitor. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you skipped the pause because of my long explanation.
No, it's fine. It was a great pause.
Come back. But this. But Orion has the WhatsApp. Orion?
Yeah.
I was trying to get some texts, but I think let me see if they are in my email or in your in my WhatsApp. Well,
It was actually closed.
maybe. So this is Olaf. Right. So this is one link.
Yeah. So,
and then let me YouTube.
Yeah.
So it's okay, lost. And now Stefan. This is okay.
Click, press escape. Oh, this is escape. Yeah.
Wow. You see, I'm not a Mac guy.
Yeah. Or
it's too smart for me.
Yeah.
Stefan.
Push it up arrow. There we go.
So I just want Stefan because I don't know from which email he made. Stefan. Workshop on artificial intuition. So then he sent it to me via WhatsApp, which means I will send it to you via WhatsApp.
I have to show you log into my WhatsApp.
That sound is so nice.
Yeah. Thank you for.
You get that typing thing. It's so funny. Every time I say, he's writing to me. This
You get me
again.
every time. I like sitting next to you. All right.
It gets me every single time, man. It's a good one. Okay, so you will get the two videos, we project them.
Yeah.
And then you will talk.
I was talk
And I want to share at the end of it, I want to share a little text that I wrote.
Okay. Cool.
But it's very short.
And then we'll have a after chat in the bar.
And then we go for beers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how many questions raised from your. But I will close with that just to close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. My WhatsApp's loading,
So in the meantime, you can load the Olaf videos. So we can play that one. So we will, in order to make a tribute to digitality and to the digital world and to the possibilities to communicate thanks to technology asynchronically in time and in space, we will have two presentations, short presentations now by dear colleagues from Japan and the Netherlands, respectively. They will give their own spin and share a bit about their research. So, of course, if you have any questions to them, you can share them with me and I will pass them on. So the first is Olaf, and then we got Stefan. So,
okay,
now
let's see. I don't have to
we will mute.
gonna work.
Okay, sorry, I'm not muted now. Okay, so I'm introducing a few different concepts relating to today's different conversations and sort of just throwing out some tangential connections and relating to what we're talking about. So the first concept is about play and game. And so, and this notion of finite play and infinite play, or I think infinite play is, so finite games and infinite games. Infinite games are somewhat like play. So play, as I think about it, is much more like what children do. You know, it's this process of exploration, shared exploration with your environment. And in a sense, the goal of an infinite game or play is to keep the game going, right? Like to keep playing as long as possible. So to keep the other children with you, to keep the game evolving, to keep play evolving. Whereas a game is interesting because it's like, in some sense, emerges from play initially, but it also becomes very like rule bound. So a play, somehow I think it's these are like intuitive relationships, but somehow a game becomes much more like what we were describing earlier as symbolic, rule bound, whereas a play remains heavier and much more self-organizing. I also find that somehow game is something which is maybe, I'm not sure, I'm just throwing these ideas out there, but I think maybe game, so a game, for example, is like chess, for example, right? Whereas play would be more like playing in the fields and seeing what happens. So I feel like, in a sense, this is more like this Ford's creativity also. In the sense that you know what the outcome is supposed to be, right? Like with chess, there's an outcome. You're trying to get to that outcome. Like with the example you gave of like a sculptor who he sort of can picture the sculpture that he's trying to sculpt, and he's then
this was a great one. Yeah.
That was backwards.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Backwards, you
So,
back from the goal.
right.
You go.
So this is backwards, right? So with chess, for example, you know what the goal is you're trying to get to, and then you sort of come back from that. Whereas this is forwards, in the sense that you are where you are, you're playing what you're playing, but you're not playing towards a goal. You're not playing to end play. You're playing to keep play going. And in that sense, you're playing to kind of stay in the present. So this is like towards having an ending. And this is in the sense to keep exploring. Keep playing. Yeah. So one of the so that's one set of associations. One of the, right, from like a really practical point of view, when I start thinking about how we might make art science in relation to AI, I think somehow, I mean, it's on the one hand, it's very interesting. On the one hand, I think it's quite difficult. And I think it's good to already start thinking about what some of those difficulties can be in relation to making art with AI or art science with AI. Of course, in one sense, it's like AI is kind of, everyone's talking about it, everyone's thinking about it, and in some sense, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But that precisely because it's everywhere, it's quite hard to make art about. Like, it's so fast moving, it changes so much. Like, you know, like, for example, we make these images here with the Dali and so on. Like, already these kinds of images feel kind of somewhat out of date, no? So there's this side, there's all these pitfalls of with dealing with these kinds of things. Like, how do we deal with all the cliches of AI? You know, like we also see on the poster.
How that came about, because not everyone here was in the experiment.
Ah, okay. So we made this, yeah, we made this poster. Actually, Thomas made, yeah. So Thomas initially made this image here, with prompt image for artificial intuition in abstraction, mixing watercolors, pastorals, and hyperrealism as a way to like illustrate today's workshop, and said like, we make some posters with this image, and I felt like it was interesting to ask different people to try to devise an image for today's workshop, partly as a way to kind of illustrate like the different things that AI images can do, but also to kind of illustrate in some sense the way that we each think about AI. So the kinds of prompts that we would put in. No, like, so how do we think about this workshop already? It's somehow like expressed in this prompt. And yeah, there's this, you see somehow that there's all these, it's perilous now in some sense, because there's all these different, we all have totally different ideas about what the aesthetics are of AI, and which is not a bad thing. But there's also all these kinds of these cliches of what AI can be, which I think artistically is quite difficult to figure out, you know, what to do with it. But I think one of the also the problems with the difficult things about AI, working what art about AI potentially, which comes a little bit back to games, is this kind of this idea of a glass bead game, right? Meaning it's this like incredibly intricate thing. This is incredibly complex and intricate thing, AI. Like it's super fascinating, and we can get really sucked into it. But one of the difficulties of making, one of the interesting difficulties about it is that artistically, you have to it's one of those things where it might just be more interesting to do it than to show it, right? Like it's really interesting to play with AI, but then is it interesting to, when is it interesting to show the results of that playing with AI? And when is it just more interesting to let other people play with AI? Like there's a problem with representation in terms of like artistic representation in terms of AI, and how you get over that thing. So, and I think, yeah, and I think one of the things is to figure out how to open it up to other people, how to collaborate with AI, or how to extend a bit like Olaf was saying, also like to extend our minds with AI, to become these kind of extended minds with AI, or to become these extended minds with each other. You know? So with that, I thought of a text, a short text which I had written sometime before, which suddenly became interesting to reread in the context of AI. The text is called "All Thinking is Thinking Together." I think I wrote this text a couple of years ago. A reflection on networks and thinking. Okay, I'm gonna read. All thinking takes place in complex adaptive systems, which, as we know, are composed of parts which interact, therefore forming relationships between the parts. In other words, all thinking takes place in adaptive networks. The kind of thinking that takes place depends on the form of the network in which it takes place. The kind of thinking we are most familiar with is the human brain. Whether we are thinking about science or art or anything else, we know that the network of the brain must be involved in that thinking. Subjectively, we have a mind, and we can suppose that mind is an emergent phenomenon of certain kinds of network. We also know that thinking is subjectively different in different situations. For example, we know that thinking while sitting is different from thinking whilst walking in the mountains. Our bodies are also a part of the network of our thinking, and how we use our body changes the thinking that emerges from that network. So when we speak of thinking, we must also acknowledge the feeling, sensing, and intuiting. So our thinking is embodied. Varela puts it like this: by using the term embodied, we mean to highlight 2 points. First, that cognition depends upon the kinds of experience that come from having a body with various sensory motor capacities. And second, that these individual sensory capacities are themselves embedded in a more encompassing biological, psychological, and cultural context, end quote. Thinking sitting down is therefore different to thinking sitting down with a pen in one's hand. And functionally, we can write and later reread a note on a piece of paper. A thinking network or mind is extendable. An extension changes how we think and what we think. The network can also be extended by communicating with another person, or 2 people, or an AI. And it's different according to who those other people are. A group of people will form an extended thinking network, inputting, outputting, and circulating ideas to, from, and in between one another. Ideas are not solely the product of one mind, but can be reshaped, constructed, and evolve mimetically through the interaction of many minds, plus books, notebooks, papers, videos, artworks, computers, and so on. Objects do not serve us individually, but serve as shared transmission in a wider environment. Not only do physical materials act as extended memory, their representations also become enfolded into our internal networks in significant ways. Lakoff and Johnson famously write that physical objects, actions, and situations, such as containers, spaces, trajectories, serve as mappings to think through more complex domains. Lakoff argues that all cognition is based on the knowledge that comes from the body, and that other domains are mapped onto our embodied knowledge. They argue our ordinary conceptual system, in terms of which we both think and act, is fundamentally metaphorical in nature. Metaphor constrains and permits what we can think, as it is a fundamental means by which we can think about one domain in terms of another. As well as extended memory and mappings for internal metaphor, physical materials can have another role in extending thinking. For example, clay plus moisture plus gravity will react to the impulses, ideas, and imagination of the hands. It will easily retain some of the ideas of the child and yet resist others. If some information is left out, this means that some information is left in. This entails a form of selection, in other words, processing. Other material, any material or medium can thus participate in a thinking network in different ways. All thinking happens in networks. According to Bateson, the complementary conjecture is that wherever and whenever networks exist of sufficient complexity with feedback and adaptation, then self-organization will take place, which is akin to thinking, if not actual thinking by some broader definition of thinking. And that complexity, says Bateson, occurs in a great many places besides the inside of my head and yours. These minimal characteristics are generated wherever and whenever the appropriate circuit structure of causal loops exists. Mind is a necessary and inevitable function of the appropriate complexity wherever that complexity occurs. A redwood forest or a coral reef with its aggregate of organisms interlocking in their relationships has the necessary general structure. A human society is like this, with closed loops of causation, end quote. In a sense, both art and science are variations of this principle. Artists and scientists are subjects who both contain an external complex adaptive network and who participate in wider networks or environments. Processing happens through the whole wider network. Both artists and scientists enter into thinking networks, extended, coupled, embodied, and enacted with the things they are studying together with others. Within these networks, feedback and iteration happen, and patterns emerge, and these patterns become source domains for metaphorical thinking, system 1. As Francis was mentioning this morning, i.e., to understand a given phenomenon in terms of a newly formed pattern, and logical thinking, system 2, does the hard work of checking these intuitions, and following through their logical consequences. The difference in thinking styles of art and science reflects the different networks that artists and scientists consciously or unconsciously have set up through which to think, or to let thinking happen. Einstein and Escher made jumps of logic which seemed to be inexplicable based on the knowledge that was available to them at the time. Escher's work actually prefigured and influenced advances in mathematics, even though he himself did not feel he understood mathematics. However, I feel that the intuition of Einstein or Escher is not a mysterious element, but more like an emergent property of a particular network of thought that they cultivated and developed around and within themselves. Einstein's network incorporated conceptual metaphors of physical space and travel connected to physical bodily sensations, through which he could use the metaphor of movement to infer possible relationships in his mind in order to think about space-time and relativity in ways he could not do using mathematics alone. Escher set up feedback loops between his observations of natural patterns and tessellations of Moorish architecture with his internal mind and his notebooks. The drawings and observations updated his thinking, just as his thinking, mediated by his hands and eyes, updated the drawings and observations. The new ideas, I would like to think, were an emergent phenomenon of the whole system. Looking at Escher's images, it would be surprising if he hadn't thought about the nature of feedback. The geometrical patterns served as metaphors to think about patterns in drawing and real space, such as staircases, and about complex geometries. Bohm cites the etymology of dialogue as coming through the flow of meaning between and among us all. I see a direct correspondence between this and Gordon Pask's definition of cybernetics as the study of information flows in all media, together with Heinz von Forrester's suggestive etymology as a computer, as from the Latin computare, meaning thinking together. Originally, computers were rooms of people doing mathematics and thinking together. Thinking is always distributed, always collaborative, always participatory, and always transdisciplinary. Thinking takes place in nested complex networks or networks within networks. And the kind of thinking that takes place depends on the network, actors or agents involved in that thinking network. Thinking is always thinking together with one's body, with other people, with other components, computers, with other material. So I just want to relate to close. With just this, just putting this idea out, like how do we turn this research into AI, into not a glass bead game, but a collective process of thinking and thought, and an open game, and here to illustrate what kinds of novel thinking systems can we form by becoming ourselves these kind of algorithms, or playing these open games together, or even how do we find this best what are the really interesting forms of collaboration between us and the AI, like we join forces with them, form a single thinking network with them. Okay, sure. I just wanted to one last thing, just to Katerina earlier was talking about the negative poetry. And so I just wanted to show you with an earlier iteration that we made of negative poetry as a human algorithm, where we become a collective thinking system together. I will fast forward it to around the moment. Mhm. Patient. Keyword search, line 50.
Invert word live. Invert word pose.
Word number. Mental image, word fact.
Invert word coming. Invert word operation. Read whole poem line by line.
Keyword search, whole poem. Read line 17. Maybe. There's a kind of algorithm involved in how we collectively make decisions about what we're gonna, which words we're gonna target. And this is this collective moment of choosing which rule we're gonna do. And then there's another process where you take on the rules that other people have proposed. No? So you either propose a new rule or you answer the previous rule. Answer the previous rule.
Material is number, a calling.
Someone. Trade, a with coming. Someone.
Anyway.
Occasion.
We'll I'll put the links to this and some other algorithmic pieces which involve kind of collective thinking together also on in the links that we sent.
Orion, what are you doing there together? Is this prompting? You prompt?
We prompt each other. I mean, when I was thinking about this today, I thought it's sort of interesting, a kind of a shorthand way to relate this kind of work to it's this kind of artificial intelligence. So in these works, we're kind of becoming a computer together.
Yeah, but what are you doing exactly there? You're not prompting an AI. No. So when somebody says negation, what is happening then?
So it's a linear system. So we go one after the other. We go in a circle. There's basically one rule, I guess, two rules. Trying to think clearly remember clearly how it works. Either you have like rules like you can select a line or a word or the whole poem, and you can ask that thing to be inverted, right? So you could say, for example, line 2, word 3, invert. That would be like a valid instruction in this game.
And who is doing this then?
The next person along then does that. But the next person on your turn, you have the choice to either carry out the current instruction or to change the instruction. And if you change the instruction, that's your turn over. It then passes to the next person. And they then have the choice to carry out the instruction or change the instruction. So collectively, it's like you're trying to figure out what's the best next instruction. And and if you stick with an instruction for a while, you're trying to figure out the best way to answer that.
So yeah, you have a piece of text and you have operations.
Yeah. So what's missing from this is the fact that we're all looking at the same poem.
Okay.
Yeah, that's clearly what's missing from this screen. Yeah.
And goal and purpose of how you make the problem.
This piece, no. With this piece, why not? Because I think probably the straightforward answer is because I'm not a scientist.
Because yes, that's what you said.
But then if you whatever you just time like make an experiment, right? An experiment, you don't need to have a degree because you need to have like broad purpose and like method. I think it would help you because I may imagine that you have a lot of experiments. You could really collect them all together and to come to a really interesting conclusion, which for them to keep you in mind to reach this great, but this is exactly this, but this is like from the observe this other thing and collect it. how big is going to be, right?
Mm.
I was thinking, my question was like, the linking to the fallback, like, do you have some description or reference or?
We did. I don't have it here now. I mean, I could find it, but we have another. There was another system, very simple game that we devised called the Wonder Machine, which is super simple algorithm. It's just everyone talks in a circle, but this time you start every sentence with the word "I wonder." That's it. You just say whatever you're thinking about, or what you have in sense or about. And what starts to happen is that the wondering starts to interact, and people start wondering about each other's wondering. And I think you do actually get a certain kind of collective intuition coming out of it, and so we got interested in that actually, like how certain ideas start to emerge in the group, and people start to make, this process of priming starts to happen, and people start to make the connections and associations between other people's wondering when you start doing it for a large amount of time. And there we were working with this Renska. This was the, should I say, like the interactions group. So when I was a fellow in Amsterdam, Institute of Advanced Studies, when Corona happened, we started the group and went online. We basically just made these like collective thinking experiments every week. And so these guys, Renska, she's an evolutionary biologist, Cassandra's an evolutionary biologist, and they said exactly what you said, and they were like, we're going to do the data on the Wonder Machine. And so they started making graphs about ideas and how ideas emerge through time, stuff like that. Yes, certainly, but not right now.
The guy that showed the bacteria in the February's workshop?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we met at ES, and we had this collective online collective for a couple of years.
So we are kind of like, I guess, maybe coming towards the end. I wonder if anybody has interest to share a little bit of something, like maybe feel that this is probably the moment. Anybody else?
Olivia, you wanted to talk like 5 minutes about your image. Yeah.
No, but you can show something else. Maybe people online as well.
This image,
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Olivier.
Maybe the big one is mainly
directed.
portraits. If you
This one?
Yes, this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. This is the image I did to Orion when I asked to send some images. This is images I got from Stable Diffusion of the AI system that generate images. And the prompt is very simple. It's just with like portraits of museum directors. And in fact, I put it in an exhibition of AI art in France. So I have been working a long time for this cultural sector in France, and I know that sometimes the main artwork in the museum is the museum director itself. So I find it funny to make an artwork with museum directors in art exhibition. But what is the relation between this and the subject of our seminar today is the question, I think, of prototypes. These images are made by the AI, and that shows that the AI has somehow a prototype of a museum director in his head, in his model. And yeah, this is another image. This is a real museum director. This is a new museum director of the Venice Biennale. I stumbled upon this image after doing that, and you can put this image in this series. That's exactly the same. The AI has really a prototype of a museum director in this model, just like we have kind of model of a museum director or a politician or a serial killer or I don't know, a Russian spy. I don't know. And in fact, I made many series of people, of portraits, of different categories of people. And the question of prototype is very deep, I think. It's related to Kahneman, the Linda problem of Kahneman. Can you summarize it? Yes, very quickly.
Is there anybody who doesn't know the Linda problem?
The what?
The Linda problem. Okay, good. Then. So let's think about the following. I will get those. So Linda problem in a nutshell. So the idea is to think about this woman, Linda, who studied philosophy, was very bright, and always concerned with social justice, going to riots, protests, squad, all that. She was into this thing. Then time passed, and now she's 30 years old. And then you get a series of questions about what would you expect to be reasonable or likely for Linda. And they said, yes? Which one? Yeah, this is the first question. So the first question is that she works at the bank. She is a bank teller. So she is a, I would say, bank teller. So she works at the bank. So the second question is, she is feminist. Feminist. So among these two questions, normally, like I would just give and there is a third question that says she works as she's a feminist and works as a bank teller. So the thing, I will not judge you. You can think in your own brain now, in your own mind, what of these three is the first most likely, the second most likely, and the third most likely. So what people normally do is they say, this is first, this is second, and this is third most likely. They tested it with probabilities, with sorting, with millions of ways, with other sorts of situations. But the thing is that if you look from a rational set theoretical perspective, you got bank teller here. Is the set of cases in which she's a bank teller, maybe smaller, we would say, or maybe something like not so significant. She's feminist, according to the description, it's very big. So it could be something like this. And then she's a bank teller, and it is a bank teller and feminist. It lies in the intersection, because it demands the two things at the same time to be whole. So why the probability of the intersection between something and something else will be larger than the probability of the thing itself? Why it will be larger? It's impossible, according to this view, which represents the way in which we rationally think of events and probabilities. Because this way of thinking is what explains thermodynamics, the motion of planets, and this and that. But then when you take to psychology, then people tend to attribute joint categories a higher likelihood than a specific or singular atomic categories.
Yeah. And why? Because this is a prototype, a category that we have in mind. You know? Something that is yeah, more complex in terms of probability, but it's simpler in our mind. We can imagine that kind of people more like than only this. And yeah, these people are categories, are cliches. We can imagine this, and I think what is fascinating is that the AI copy these categories, and we can yeah, make thousands of images like this. And yeah, speaking about Kahneman Linda problem, I asked also ChatGPT Linda problem, exactly as you mentioned. Linda is etc. And I asked this question, and ChatGPT, oh, it's like as a human, yeah. Exactly as a human. So ChatGPT copied our category. Yeah. Yes. And if you ask ChatGPT, please answer as a professor of mathematics, then slowly, you understand this. But slowly, yeah, you have to guide it. Yeah. To get the answer.
Yes. Yeah, it's not excluded. They didn't apologize. Yeah. I also find it. Yeah, yeah. When you prove it wrong, yeah, you prove it wrong, you apologize. Yeah, oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, it's fun. So yeah, that relates a lot to the research in the triangular inequality as well. So trying to put categories, because the traditional view of it's Heylighen or Roche, you know Roche? Yeah, Heylighen or Roche did this idea category and sort of like theory of categories. So the idea is back again to this space, and we got instances of many like museum directors, and they all have some sort of similarity. And then there is a prototype which might not be any of them. It might not even exist. But it's somehow like the most related to all of them. So that was a way in the 80s, more or less, the late 70s and 80s, to encode the meaning. And that was the beginning of statistical natural language processing, like the stuff that Katarina was showing as well. It falls from advances in mathematizing that thing. But still, I'm concerned with the idea we start from the basis that that thing is a space already, and distances and all that already, and even for granted as they are in our physical space. That's my research.
I think there is probably I don't sit within that part, but when we get solution that comes to mind that
yeah,
only what answer expects things from the interview. Yeah. And if you give several options, like you say, Linda is a human, it's not specific at all, so it's not informative. So
yeah,
there is an expectation of being precise, and by looking at the intersection, as you showed, you are much more precise characterize what she would be, but well, well, as a human or I think it's interesting.
But I think it's also simply that from the description, you're clear, you're 100% sure that she's a feminist. Like from what she did at university, right? So the idea that she wouldn't now be a feminist and would only be a bank teller is like somehow you can't think that. Even though logically it makes sense, but it's just you're primed, you're so primed now to think that she's a feminist.
I don't want to make you feel like I don't think we can be creative, but all the arguments that can come up to discuss this have been already put in with Olga. We did our research. This program has like 30 years, and we have reviewed it like well, she has reviewed like thousands of articles. You know, there are like how many articles are now? I don't really.
No, it's like more. It's like 2015, like 2016. That is a bit more. And then I made a grade for 2023, so it was like another 100. Yeah, of course I used intuition, and I used keywords, and there was also some methods. And the aim of our article was exactly to show that there are no equal strategy to solve the problem. And that's why you can bring a lot of arguments, but if you don't even make the interview in the same way, to change the context, if you change the, like, is it what is more likely or rate the probability of option A and option B, it's like, it's really changed the concept of this problem. This was also like the critical conclusion that we need, like, one example of the problem, but we need reassert, I would say, like the source of strategy, how to study cognitive errors and how to gather data. And my like further thought was that we need to just that use probability theory and we want to explain it.
Okay, I don't think it's a coach. I mean, she's definitely a feminist. You know, like, there's no way she's not. So it's not a cognitive error. That's the thing. You can say it's like logically unlikely, less likely that she's a bank teller and a feminist than just being a bank teller. And you're absolutely right, logically. But I know in my soul that she's a feminist.
Using probability theory is wrong. But when you talk about real life, you're right. So this is the motivation to change the strategy to study the brain, because it's very connected to our subject. So just stop saying this is rational, this is non-rational. It's just like human brain works. It's how we get the stimulus of the neural networks in our brain. And if you try to put mathematics on it, we get the conclusion that, yeah, this is mathematically wrong, but like, if you like don't study mathematics, or if you don't work with this every day, and you are, for example, 40 years old, and the last time you heard about probability theory was in school, how likely you will, you know, like think about this problem and this mathematical concept? Very unlikely. So you will probably think about reality, how the life experience, your observations, and use with you, right? Female movements and so on. So this is exactly the point.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think my thought is maybe that they are kind of mirror of our scheme, of our prototype, our bias. All this are, I think, cliche from the same time. This is cliche. This is cliche, and this is cliche. And I think if the mirror of AI and our eyes cliche, we see the cliche and think something else. Change our mind. I think AI is related to our language on long-term level, and will change our mind when we mirror effect. It's a meta level. Something that will change. We change in our language very definitely.
When you say a cliche, you mean it's kind of negative.
There is a lot of
cliche is not necessarily negative.
No.
It might be negative in some respects, but it actually frees you in many other respects. So in that sense, cliches, just like routines, are extremely useful.
Yes, and sometimes extremely dangerous. So you can't, that kind of cliche of portrays, you know, you have been known at the beginning of the 20th century, late 19th century, about killers and so on, or Jews to find some proportion of the it's very then. Cliche can be extremely dangerous socially and politically.
So we call it a style, Mark? I'm sorry. Yeah. Coming from an art perspective, we're talking about style. If I make a noir movie, and I have people wearing fedoras and, you know, like The Godfather, then I made a noir movie. we have creative cliches about how Italians don't want to look or be associated.
But then you acknowledge the cliche.
Exactly.
But that's dealing with, that's also, it's not the cliche is bad, but
No, but
you
we're
have
dealing with
to,
it.
it's a relationship with art and cliche.
Are we dealing with a subterfuge? Is this a subterfuge that we're looking at? Is the AI trying to fool us to, is this propaganda? If you say, this is the cliche propaganda, and then, you know, what the worst that can happen? Yes, I understand the caricature, the Jewish portraiture, I fully agree. But we're talking here about the AI. Isn't the AI trying to create here like a golden mean, as we would say also in art? Our image of a museum director? Or,
yeah,
am I wrong?
No, you're right. But that's new, but there's not, there's nuance to what you're saying, right?
I'm saying cliche is neutral. We can see it negatively if it's used negatively. But if you use it positively, follow the style. You know.
I think it's really complicated. It's super complicated.
You're using cliches, you're appealing to something that expectation. Right? You're working with expectation.
I think there are different things. I think we have, we can also talk about archetypes. Maybe what are archetypes? Then we talk about, and then we take into consideration that it's not, so if it is a cliche or an archetype or a prototype, this is the one thing. And the other thing is the power of images. This is something else. For example, this really struck me when we played a few days ago with Maggie Nichols. She told me she started to go into the jazz thing in England in 1966, and she was 16, and she wanted to become a singer because jazz, female jazz singer. And then she got in the early 70s into contact with the first feminist groups, and she told me this was really something that really somehow blew my mind. She told me that, and it was really like when she came into contact with these other women, that it was because of the repertoire of images that were around that she only had the idea to become a jazz singer because there were only images by women who are singers, not piano players, not drummers, not guitar players. And this is, and I think that we have to distinguish between the power of images on the one hand, and on the other hand, between prototypes and archetypes, and this kind of, and of course, then the distribution of images. And this is, of course, another dimension we have here at play. This is the heavy distribution of images that are happening at the moment because of the internet, which is a completely new situation compared to going to the cinema and having magazines. But this has, and we know from the history of art that the ones who are in power, they have the images, like the paintings of the kings and queens and everything. This is power. This is to show this is us, and this is how the world looks like. This is how we look. This is how life looks like. And this is, but these are different. As you said, it's a super complex thing that we are touching here on different levels. I agree. Okay. I think it's the fundamental problem of all creative pollution. On the one hand, we want the pollution is predictive. It means we want to have an idea of, let's say, how the typical museum director looks like. On the other hand, we want to discover new things. So maybe we might want to find a museum director that is, I don't know, black or Muslim or who is not like a cliche. And there is this fine line between staying in the things that are known and are predictable and are stable and going beyond, which is always a risk, but which also the risk that we discover something that's better. And I think one of the dangers with AI in this respect is if it kind of finds the cliches, the stereotypes, the default assumptions, and people are going to use them from AI, then they will confirm these stereotypes, and then AI will pick up these new stereotypes. And what you get after a while is that if you feed AI with itself, it becomes more and more stereotypical. And that's then the danger that you reduce the variety. So one of the dangers with AI, sometimes you can say AI typically will write a better text than the average person, but the text will be more predictable. So if you would feed AIs with text generated by AI, they become more and more predictable. And after the end, you will have very nicely written, fluid, smooth texts, which are predictable. So that's why you need an injection of people who experiment, who go outside of the cliches, and that can then help the AIs to learn better ways. But yeah, that's where a little bit where the danger is. The AI helps in some respect, but if you rely too much on it, it reduces creativity.
Well, cliche is a printing term, right? It's not
Yeah.
It's like there's certain letters that go together more often, so they have a piece that does that letter, you know, like a TH or a.
Actually, what is the line between the definition of something and the cliche of something? Because in a way, they both serve in some ways, well, I don't say they are identical, but there is a very thin line, I would say.
Well, what's the definition of a museum director? Is it that they're white?
No, that's.
Is it that
they are almost all of them depicted with the background of some artwork.
But is that the definition or is that the
What
cliche?
museum director, what is the definition? It's somebody
It all
who runs a museum.
40-ish.
So.
But if you didn't tell us you're a museum director, I would not have known. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I was just looking at the figures, trying to figure out, are they chocolate?
We still the general
Yes.
for
But they're
middle age.
Visit, they're not
Europeans.
I mean, you could put me there and I would kind of fit, and I never thought in my life to be going to museum director. So I'm a part of a cliche I'm not even aware of.
Maybe there is a museum director in you that you haven't discovered.
I see it waiting for me to.
Yeah. Don't you think that's the background to see the defining elements?
Yeah.
What? So there.
And AI museum director.
Yeah,
We
maybe
need
first
more.
of this part, it was sort of, I think AI, currently is a little something used in the other perspective, like it's very clear that it's by countries, because we don't sort of apply AI in a way to get the bad output and then make a decision to sort of integrate this bias that we get, so sort of information to it, or
It's not a bias, if the majority of museum directors are European, rights, so then it's not a bias, it's just reflecting reality.
Sometimes the other point I want to make this a bit more from before, but went a little further, but then also want to understand that problem, but also want to see that further maybe some mathematics, some what kind of data you have, very data driven, and maybe mathematical ways of thinking. So and so it's the idea that because of this is very intelligence and knowledgeable lecture. And this morning I read an example now sort of mathematics obviously for real for a lot of people. And so for example, questions we have two birds with three is one bird. How many birds, well, how many different birds in the tree? Yeah, it's not even technically it's none. But there will be none in the tree. There's one of the things. It should be able to grasp in a way that gives it context and it's going to be difficult to get this. Yeah, so the thing
Have you fed those to ChatGPT and asked for the answer? And it says it just calculated this before.
That's also the kind of question normally speaking of visual context better than non-visual context, right? Because you can visualize the scene, see the gun going on, then you go, okay, one bird is flying, of course the other bird is flying. If one bird gets shot, of course the other one's going to fly off. No? So it's also interesting this it's kind of interiority, you know, like of course ChatGPT doesn't have anything like that as an internal mind. So, yeah.
I guess we can get close. I have this small comment about the museum director definition. Just to and I wanted to mention something about the impossibles around this topic. I don't see myself anyways. There is a distinction in the definition and prototype, which maybe is easy to draw, which is and this comes from the notion of how to define something. So there are definitions that are called extensional and others that are intentional. The extensional definitions would be like what we see here, and they show us what is a dog. You get a picture of all the possible dogs, and that is a definition of a dog. Like the database, all dogs is the notion of dog encoded extensionally in the extension of what the concept can mean. Intentionally would be to make a definition of that in terms of its properties. So actually the extensional definition is museum director 1 or museum director 2 or blah, 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 blah. So you make a disjunction of possibilities in reality. Instead, museum director definition, I don't think it encodes being white or being European or being museum director is something, maybe definition. It works at the institution of a museum and it has the role of a director. You know, maybe for that you need a specific degree, maybe for that you need a specific experience, and then you can list that. So then you will have a list of properties. So property 1 and property 2 and property 3 and so on. So and this is and in some logic. So I will say and. So you get the extensional definition is a disjunction of instances. The intentional definition is a conjunction of properties. So it's like dual to each other.
Okay, the last thing again, the last
sentence. Extensional is disjunction of instances or database. Intentional is conjunction of properties. So this property and that property and that property and that property.
So it's another way of saying that one of them is differences and the other one is similarities.
Not exactly. That's another way. Yeah.
Everything that fits in
possibilities.
Everything that has all the things at the same time.
Yeah. So this is property 1 and property 2. So like it barks and it has 4 legs and I don't know, it's a mammal. Okay, you get dog. And then it meows, then you get cat. But if I give you the sorry, if I give you the list of dogs, then that's extension.
Okay, so one is or and one is and.
Just let me say that this conjunction, this is the strategy also of background listening.
Yeah.
It is a museum director if it has the following properties.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing about this is that AI and all these statistical methods and distributional models, they learn from data. So they only can learn this way. And they don't even know, they cannot know the intentional definitions. We can build intentional definitions by using logic and then using like the relations that logic allows to encode for what we as humans think of intention, and then embed it into a programming language that will mimic as we encode intentional notions, but they are only able to calculate instances in the end, ones and zeros, bytes and representations of objects. So the thing is that when you encode in this way, what properties of the reality you are actually encoding and how do you sample them, then that's a thing that giving a very fair sample according to the state of reality of something doesn't mean that the system is going to be learning the properties of that something. It's not learning. These pictures don't encode clearly that, I don't know, that the person has a art history degree or something like that. That which is maybe, let's say, or management capacity, something like that. It's not clear in the picture. What is clear in the picture is maybe the most salient features of what the category is in the world of the kitchen. Yeah, but clear. But that might not be the qualities that are needed for the concept itself. So that's how the system can kind of get confused about what the reality that is represented. And that's what the bias is. It can be dangerous because it misapplies. So,
I think the is the most predictable set of properties for everything. The most predictable set of properties. So there is some properties for an object, and we can have like long-term, like so exactly for this object we observe one set, for example, one set. This is like we see more like we call it cliche.
Yeah.
So cliche comes from definition, but it's also there's from our the common experience about the
Yes, and that's yeah. So but those more predictable properties and maybe not the most relevant properties for the concept. That's where the problem comes. If we will equate these two things, it will be perfect. But it's not the case. Yeah.
Or, for example, if you see exactly this set, we can say that the object before the situation.
Yeah.
But if it's just like, for example, I don't know, for example, Russian spies or something like this, right? So, yeah, circular. If we change it hair color, one property, completely change it.
Yeah.
Only in this specific unique set, the most predictable from human observation, we can give it the name of cliche that one for us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's time for a beer, I guess. So I want to share a very short text, which I think it's relevant for this closing because of the intuition concept that we are discussing. And I think it confirms somehow the learning. And also before closing, I want to thank everyone for coming, and also especially the students to share later on their writings, their questions, because we would like to do some sort of follow-up to this. And try to explore together maybe in the future. I don't know exactly when, but explore further what we are learning today. So many new ideas, many things. Yeah. So let me share this. Okay, here it is. So is everybody is familiar with the three transformations of Nietzsche? No? Okay, no. Who knows the three transformations? Nietzsche. Three transformations of Nietzsche. No? Okay, so then I will read it. Oh, yeah, you know, of course. Yeah. So it's very short, huh? It's like 2 minutes, maybe less. Today, AI systems can match us in many cognitive skills when appropriately trained and used. But we still feel different to them. We still feel different to AI systems. This is not anymore because we are better than them at understanding things, but because we can set our own values and goals, and they cannot. So at the recent talk by Olaf and Yuko, I had an idea about how such a difference between AI and us might disappear in the future. The idea is inspired by this Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche, specifically by one small chapter called The Three Transformations of the Human Spirit, which very shortly goes like this. There are 3 stages. In the first stage, called the camel, the human spirit is a camel that obediently accepts societal norms, traditions, and moral codes without questioning them. Then it evolves into a second lion stage, where it fiercely rebels against the constraints and values imposed by society. In the last child stage, the individual creates its own values and lives free from external impositions. So these three stages of the AI experience, which is much more research, investigation, and so on, but I made an analogy, and I call the camel, but I call it like the CAI camel. Yeah, AI, the camel, represents the early stages of AI characterized by supervised learning and rule-based algorithms. It follows human rules, either by programmed logic or by programmed calculations. It follows predefined rules and patterns aiming to imitate how we deal with tasks. So this stage presents no risk to humans because it's totally controlled by design and operation by us. Then the lion moves this beyond this simple instruction, and it begins to make independent decisions, not anymore imitating or being controlled by humans, but evaluating the consequences of its actions using some fitness or correctness functions that can be given by the humans or they can try themselves. So machine learning models like deep reinforcement learning are the kind of thing like that. Today, I think AI systems are starting this era, and they are becoming increasingly able to autonomously learn and adapt based on feedback, based on the feedback they receive from their actions, from the responses they like or not like. And the lion now is perceived as a threat by many people because we cannot understand exactly how it learns and that could act eventually harmfully to us. However, I think that it's very important to notice that this lion stage, the lion is still a rather basic form of intelligence because it's not yet free to attach or detach from the feedback that it receives from the correctness criteria. Now the child, okay, the child, so will become able not to adapt just by a function-driven feedback, but also in creative ways that will possibly encode experimentation and play. So this is the most important part for me to say here. It seems necessary on the one hand, but in order to be able to create, able to create these childs, so AIs that can experiment, that can play, not just solve problems and they can learn what is important, what is relevant in a playful way. So in order to reach this, we need to understand first how goals and values emerge and evolve. And on the other hand, we have to find ways for systems, for artificial systems, to attach and detach from these values in an autonomous way, And I believe that a closer inspection of how ourselves and the collectives we are part of establish processes of goal formation, evaluation, and evolution will be an important source of inspiration for unveiling the mechanisms that will drive not just the next generation of AI, but also our relation to them. So yeah, this is the text I wanted to share because I honestly think that this artificial intuition thing and the relationship with AI is just starting. We really need to think of what will be played and more information. So now, thank you to all the people coming in online. So we thank you very much. I think the camera is still visible. Yeah, everybody is leaving now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Let's continue the conclusion of the march. Okay. Oh, let's stop the recording. Oh, sorry. Yeah.